Among the 10 most catastrophic train accidents in the history of the world, it is heartbreaking to know that India accounts for 3 of them. The one at the top of the list can only be compared to the gates of hell opening, claiming the lives of more than 1,700 people at a small railway station. You might think that a delayed train or an elderly passenger taking your seat is enough to ruin your day, but after watching today's video, you will realize those are nothing more than minor inconveniences of travel. From a small mistake by a railway worker that sent 2 trains crashing head-on, or the terrifying moment when several train carriages plunged straight off a bridge into a deep valley. These disasters did not occur during wartime or in an era of collapsing infrastructure. Some happened only 10 years ago, 5 years ago, or even within the past couple of years. In today's video, join Top 10 Global as we travel down the tracks of time to revisit the 10 most horrifying train accidents in history. Each tragedy is as terrifying as a scene from a disaster film. Remember to subscribe, like and share to support the channel. Number 10. The Taroko train disaster, Taiwan. At 9:28 a.m. on April 2nd, 2021, Taroko Express train number 408 departed Taipei Station, carrying 498 passengers. The train traveled south along Taiwan's winding eastern railway line toward Taitung. It was the first day of the Tomb Sweeping Festival holiday, and the carriages were packed with passengers, families returning home, hikers heading for the mountains, and tourists traveling to Hualien to admire the coastal scenery. Outside the windows, mountains and the sea painted a picture of serenity. Inside the carriages, the atmosphere was calm and relaxed. Some passengers looked down at their phones, checking maps and travel times. But as the train sped along at more than 120 kilometers per hour, approaching the northern entrance of the Qingshui Tunnel in Hualien, disaster struck. A construction truck had fallen from a nearby slope onto the railway tracks ahead, blocking the path of the oncoming train. The driver reacted instantly, slamming on the brakes. The sound of metal shrieking against metal echoed through the mountains like the final roar of a wounded beast. Yet, a train weighing hundreds of tons cannot stop so easily. A second later, the collision came. A thunderous crash like 2 mountains colliding. The first carriage smashed head-on into a steel wall, crumpling instantly like an aluminium can, crushed by an invisible giant hand. The second and third carriages followed, slamming into the tunnel's entrance. Steel plates folded, seats overturned, and the carriages twisted like sheets of paper. Screams and cries filled the darkness. The 5th carriage suffered the worst damage. It was jammed tight into the tunnel wall like a dart, leaving almost no room for passengers to move or escape. Within seconds, the air was thick with smoke, dust, and the acrid smell of burning metal. When rescue teams arrived, they were stunned. The train had become wedged tightly at the tunnel entrance, blocking any direct access. Many carriages were so deformed that they lay almost flat against the rails. Passengers were trapped between layers of mangled steel. Rescuers had to use electric cutters and hydraulic tools, working their way from the 8th carriage at the rear, crawling through narrow, pitch-black gaps to pull survivors out one by one. One rescuer later recalled, "That wasn't a train, it was a coffin made of steel." According to the Taiwan Transportation Safety Board, the cause of the accident was a construction truck that had slid down the slope for unknown reasons. The tragedy claimed 49 lives and left 213 injured, making it the deadliest rail disaster in Taiwan in 73 years. The Taroko derailment was a human-made catastrophe, a tragedy that could have been prevented, yet bureaucracy and negligence turned it into one of the darkest days in Taiwan's railway history. Number 9. The Larissa train disaster, Greece. On the night of February 28, 2023, a passenger train carrying around 350 people collided head-on with a freight train north of Larissa in central Greece, roughly 27 kilometers away. The first car was completely destroyed and burst into flames instantly. One witness described the scene as being trapped inside a steel furnace, with fire spewing from every crack and no escape for those inside. Because the carriages were so badly deformed, rescue teams had to use heavy machinery and search dogs to locate survivors. The collision claimed 57 lives and injured 85 more. Most of the victims were university students returning to school after the carnival holiday. When Greek authorities revealed the cause of the disaster, nationwide outrage erupted. Hundreds of thousands of people took to the streets to protest. The investigation found that this tragedy, the deadliest rail disaster in Greece's modern history, was caused by a simple human error. A station master failed to switch the tracks in time, sending both trains onto the same line. This was not a scene from a disaster movie, but a real event in 2023 on a main railway line of a European Union nation. In an age of high-speed transport and digital safety systems, a catastrophe caused by such a basic mistake was not only a tragedy, it was a wake-up call and a devastating blow to trust in public infrastructure. Number 8. The Santiago train disaster, Spain. In Spain, the 25th of July is the feast day of St. James, the nation's patron saint. Every year, thousands of Catholic pilgrims travel from all over the world to Santiago de Compostela to celebrate. But in 2013, this day turned into a day of national mourning. On the evening of July 24, 2013, a passenger train carrying 247 passengers departed Madrid for the city of Ferrol. As it approached a sharp bend just 3 kilometers from Santiago station, passengers suddenly heard a loud explosion. In the next instant, 13 carriages flew off the tracks like shooting stars. Some were crushed, others hurled dozens of meters away, and one even crashed into the yard of a nearby house. A survivor later recalled that the train began to shake violently before overturning. He lost consciousness, and when he awoke, the scene around him was pure devastation. The disaster killed 80 people and injured more than 140, making it Spain's worst rail accident since 1944. The cause was tragically simple. The train's driver had forgotten to slow down before entering the curve. According to regulations, trains must reduce their speed to 80 kilometers per hour at that section. But at the time, the train was traveling at 190 kilometers per hour. When the driver realized his mistake and tried to brake, it was too late. The speed was too great, and the train could not slow down in time. In an instant, the nightmare unfolded. A train designed with modern technology still depended entirely on human judgment to slow at a sharp curve. When that single layer of human attention failed, dozens of lives were lost. Blaming the driver is easy, but questioning the system is harder. This tragedy was not just a mistake. It was a stark reminder that even in an age of automation, human error can still turn progress into disaster. Number 7. The Valley Railway Bridge Collapse, India. In June 2005, the Indian state of Maharashtra was in the grip of a powerful monsoon. Torrential rain brought severe flooding, washing away roads and cutting off transportation routes. Many railway bridges were already under warning for structural risk. One of them was the Valley Bridge, a large colonial-era structure built nearly a century earlier. Though still in use, it had not been regularly inspected or reinforced. Years of erosion from floods had weakened its foundation. On the stormy night of June 22nd, an express train carrying more than 500 passengers raced toward the Valley River, unaware of any danger ahead. There had been no warnings, no signals to stop. As soon as the locomotive reached the bridge, the entire structure collapsed beneath it. 5 carriages plunged straight into the raging Valley River below. The water was deep and ferocious, swallowing the carriages within moments. Many passengers were asleep at the time, never realizing what had happened. By the time rescue teams arrived the next morning, the floodwaters had risen even higher, and several of the submerged carriages had completely disappeared. The disaster claimed at least 114 lives and injured more than 200 others, making it the deadliest railway tragedy in India that year. A century-old bridge, unable to bear the weight of a modern train, had crumbled like paper in the storm, dragging an entire train and hundreds of lives down with it. Once again, India's railways became a symbol of warning written in blood. Neglect, poor maintenance, and the absence of proper alerts are not acts of nature. They are man-made failures. It was not that nature was too fierce, but that human life was treated as far too cheap. Number 6. The Firozabad train collision, India. Once again, India. In the early hours of August 2nd, 1995, a silent catastrophe unfolded in Firozabad, Uttar Pradesh, one that would shock the world. That night, a passenger train had come to a halt on the tracks due to a mechanical failure. Passengers remained on board, unable to evacuate in time. At the same moment, an express train was racing down the same line at over 100 kilometers per hour. The worst part was that the driver of the oncoming train had no idea there was a stopped train ahead. Then came the inevitable. The two trains collided head-on with a thunderous explosion that shattered the night. Carriages crumpled like paper, derailed, and piled on top of one another. Flames erupted from several cars, trapping hundreds inside. In mere moments, chaos and death consumed the scene. More than 300 people lost their lives, and hundreds more were injured, making it one of the deadliest railway disasters in India's history. The Firozabad tragedy exposed the terrifying fragility of safety on India's railways. Even the most basic preventive systems had failed. No proper signalling, no timely warning, no emergency protocol that could have saved lives. It served as a brutal reminder that national pride and progress mean little when human negligence still outweighs human life. Number 5. The Ufa natural gas explosion, Russia. Siberia is rich in oil and natural gas, crisscrossed with vast networks of pipelines. In the 1980s, a major pipeline was constructed through the region. But after the first phase was completed, residents complained that part of the pipeline ran too close to a village. The builders were ordered to relocate it. During that process, an excavator accidentally damaged a section of the pipe, leaving a small crack. That crack became a silent time bomb. The damaged section, buried near a railway line, slowly leaked natural gas into the surrounding area, unnoticed for years. On the evening of June 3rd, 1989, operators at a nearby gas plant reported a drop in pipeline pressure and called the control center to request an inspection. But the employee responsible, eager to catch the last bus home, skipped the inspection and simply told the next shift that pressure was low and should be increased. The new operator followed those instructions, boosting the pressure and pumping even more gas through the line. The result was catastrophic. The tiny crack expanded under pressure until it ruptured completely, releasing a massive cloud of butane gas that spread across the area, settling low along the railway tracks. Some drivers passing by later reported smelling fuel, but because the warning had to pass through multiple departments, no one took immediate action. Then came the unthinkable. As two fully loaded passenger trains passed through the area simultaneously, the gas ignited. The explosion that followed was equivalent to 300 tons of TNT. The blast was so powerful, it was heard tens of kilometers away, and flames lit up the night sky like daylight. Within a radius of 1 kilometer, the forest was completely incinerated. The two trains were reduced to hollow metal shells, with carriages torn apart by the fireball. The final death toll was confirmed at 575 people, with at least 623 others injured. The Ufa explosion remains one of the deadliest railway-related disasters in history. A tragedy born not from war or sabotage, but from negligence, poor communication, and the deadly complacency of human error. Number 4. The Ethiopian train derailment. On the afternoon of January 13th, 1985, a passenger train traveling from Addis Ababa to Djibouti, carrying around 1,000 people, was crossing a large bridge over the Awash River when tragedy struck. The train was moving too fast, and the curve of the track on the bridge was dangerously sharp. The excessive speed caused the train to derail right in the middle of the bridge. 4 carriages plunged nearly 40 meters into the deep gorge below, smashing into the rocks and instantly causing massive loss of life. It remains the deadliest train disaster in the history of Africa. Although the incident drew global attention and humanitarian aid poured in from many countries, Ethiopia at the time was politically unstable, information was tightly controlled, and many victims were never officially identified. Government reports later estimated at least 450 people killed and 560 injured. Years later, survivors still recalled the horror. "We were like stones thrown by the gods into the valley," one said. "When I woke up, the world around me was torn apart, silent, broken, and unreal. The tragedy was not just a failure of speed control, it was a disaster born from neglect and disregard for human life. The old colonial-era railway line, poorly maintained and never meant for heavy passenger use, continued to carry thousands of people daily. All it took was the train running slightly too fast, and an entire train fell into the abyss." The Awash Bridge collapse was not simply an accident. It was the grim result of a nation's indifference to safety, a disaster that felt less like fate and more like manslaughter. Number 3. The Congo Valley train disaster. In 1998, on what began as an utterly ordinary morning in the heart of Central Africa, a passenger and freight train slowly departed Kanyama Station in southern Congo. It wound its way through hills, valleys, and dense forests toward the northwest, a lifeline connecting local communities to the outside world, and one of the few means of transport that ordinary people could afford. The train was old, some said decrepit. Many carriages had no windows, and even the roof was crowded with passengers clinging on for space. Inside, it was packed tight like a tin of sardines. Mothers held their children close, street vendors guarded their goods, and weary miners dozed against the rusting iron walls. Though designed to carry only a few hundred people, the train was said to be loaded with over 1,300. As the train crept along the highland route, it approached a bridge spanning a deep valley. One survivor later recalled hearing a sharp metallic screech, a sound like a brake snapping. The train began accelerating downhill, faster and faster, until it was completely out of control. The carriages rocked violently, panic erupted, and terrified passengers screamed and prayed as the train sped toward disaster. When it reached a sharp curve at the Dilukaku Valley, the locomotive derailed. The entire train, like a colossal serpent breaking apart, tumbled into the abyss below. Carriages slammed into the rocky slopes, some crushed flat, others flung dozens of meters from the tracks. The sound of tearing metal and shattering bones filled the valley. Then only silence. Rescue was agonizingly slow. With communication lines down, teams could not reach the site for days. Local villagers clawed at the wreckage with bare hands, prying open twisted carriages to pull out survivors. Many victims were only found days later. Because the passenger list was incomplete and government records disorganized, the true death toll was never known. The Red Cross and local media estimated more than 700 lives lost. One of the deadliest train disasters in African history. In the aftermath, there was no global outrage, no international mourning, perhaps because the tragedy happened in a forgotten corner of the world, or because the dead were too ordinary to make headlines. Months later, trains resumed running along the same route. The mangled wreckage still lay rusting in the valley, serving as silent tombstones, a haunting reminder that over 700 souls had perished there, in a disaster the world chose to forget. Number 2. The Bihar Railway Bridge Collapse, India. Once again, India, and once again, the monsoon season in June. This tragedy took place in 1981 in the state of Bihar. The passenger train, carrying more than 1,000 people, was traveling from Malda in West Bengal toward northern India. As it crossed a narrow iron bridge spanning the Bagmati River, the driver noticed that part of the bridge deck was submerged beneath floodwater. But because he had crossed that same bridge many times before, he underestimated the danger. After days of relentless rain, the bridge's structure had been weakened beyond repair. Its supports loosened and its foundations eroded by the violent current. On the afternoon of June 6th, as the train reached the midpoint of the bridge, disaster struck. The bridge suddenly gave way. The entire train tilted violently, then toppled over like a kite whose string had been cut, plunging straight into the raging river below. The scene was unimaginable. Carriages sank to the bottom of the flood-swollen river like stones. The cries of passengers pierced through the storm for only a few moments before fading into silence. The torrent was so fierce that many were swept away instantly, unable to even struggle. The tragedy was made worse by its location. A remote area, far from any major town. Rescue teams could not reach the site for hours, and by then, it was far too late for most. To this day, the exact death toll remains uncertain. Official Indian reports estimate between 500 and 800 dead, but unofficial accounts claim the number was far higher. Some say the carriages and the remains of the victims still lie buried beneath the riverbed. Locals recall that after the disaster, the skies over Bihar remained dark and heavy with rain for 10 days straight, as if the heavens themselves were mourning the lives lost that day. Number 1. The Sri Lanka tsunami train disaster. This was the deadliest train accident in the history of the world, a tragedy caused by one of nature's most powerful forces. The tsunami train disaster claimed the lives of an estimated 1,700 people, though the true number may have been even higher. On the peaceful Sunday morning of December 26, 2004, in a small coastal town in southern Sri Lanka, the sky was clear and the ocean breeze calm. Passengers boarded a train known as the Queen of the Sea, a slow service connecting the capital Colombo with Matara in the south. Running along the coast, the route was famed for its breathtaking views, one of the most scenic train rides in the world. The train left Colombo station at 6:50 a.m., carrying over 1,500 registered passengers, as well as hundreds more without tickets, possibly up to 2,500 people in total. Not long after departure, a seismograph station in Sri Lanka detected a massive earthquake capable of generating a tsunami. A warning was issued for the country's southwestern coast. Unfortunately, the train had no onboard communication system. Officials could only warn trains once they reached a station. 8 trains were successfully halted that morning, but the Queen of the Sea was not among them. At around 9:30 a.m., the tsunami struck the southwestern coastline. Sirens wailed as walls of water approached. Many locals believed the heavy train would be the safest place to take shelter, thinking its weight would keep it anchored. Dozens climbed onto the roof, while others huddled behind the carriages, hoping they would shield them from the waves. Then, the first wave hit. Water surged over the tracks, flooding the carriages. The force was unimaginable. Windows shattered, and passengers trapped inside pounded desperately against the doors. The train's 8 carriages were packed tight with people, but the water pressure made it impossible to open the doors. Within minutes, the compartments were completely submerged. 10 minutes later, a second, even larger wave struck. It lifted the entire train off the rails and hurled it into nearby trees and houses. Those who had climbed on top were thrown violently into the water. The nearby village of Paralia was completely wiped out. Due to the sheer scale of the tsunami across the Indian Ocean, local authorities were overwhelmed. Rescue operations were delayed, and it was nearly 7 hours before a military helicopter located the wreck. Out of everyone on board, only about 150 people survived. The estimated death toll exceeded 1,700, possibly more than 2,000. The train became a mass grave. Sri Lanka's Prime Minister visited the site and described it as beyond imagination. The international community was horrified. The disaster became known as the single deadliest train accident in human history. The tragedy inspired global reform in tsunami preparedness. It led to the establishment of the Indian Ocean Tsunami Warning System by the United Nations and several Asian nations. In Sri Lanka, December 26th is now observed as a national day of mourning. Today, a memorial stands at the site, a solemn tribute to the silent train. On it are engraved the words, "May this silent train be a warning bell that will never be forgotten." These were the 10 most horrifying train disasters in history. Which one shocked you the most? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe, like, and share so you won't miss the next video. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.